So how did you get from, employee in a scalable income thing? You said you got kind of that level of financial freedom through a scalable income source. Well, something I teach all the time is like, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. There's a lot of scalable jobs out there, right? Where you get into that kind of mentality. But how did you go from that to entrepreneur?
Yeah. I'm really big on first you earn. So you want to increase your earnings potential as much as humanly possible. Then you learn about investing and how to move forward in it. Then you apply. So you do your first couple of investments, very small. And then finally you master. And I think most people actually go, and by master, I mean, you put big checks in, you take serious risks. Most people want to go from earn to master. So I hate my job right now. So I'd like to go and be a full-time real estate investor. And that's where things go really sideways, typically. And so, one of the things we talk about a lot, and we have a group called Cash Flow, which is sort of, getting to your first, let's say, $1 million. And in this group, we talk a lot about getting comfortable with negotiation and earning. It's really incredible, actually, how few people are good at negotiation and how uncomfortable it makes them. I remember the first time I asked my boss for a raise. I went to the internet and I asked around, like, how do I do this in an appropriate manner? Because he's kind of mean. His name was Andy. Shout out Andy if he's out there. But he was very serious, smart guy, but he made you earn every single thing. And I remember when I went to go ask for my raise, I was like, what is a way where I could decrease this sucking for him? Because it's awful when somebody asks you for a raise as an employee and you can't give it to them, or you don't think they're, or as an employer, or you don't think that they're actually worth that. And so there's this tension, obviously, that happens immediately. And everybody all the time is coming to you as an employer asking for more money. And so you can actually really negatively impact the relationship. But I said, okay, I'm going to come up with like kind of a fun way that I could ask him where he is never going to have felt this before and simultaneously will feel like it's low risk. So I searched around on the internet and I kind of found this idea of, I got a cocktail napkin, and on the cocktail napkin I wrote on it like a couple numbers. Like the first number was the growth that I was going to have in the business. I think it was from a revenue perspective. Like the second number was what our profits were going to be in the business that I was working in my little lane, and then the third was what I wanted. And I pulled the napkin out in a meeting with Andy, and I'm all sweaty and I'm nervous, and I said, Andy, somewhere I read that any idea worth having at some point was written on a cocktail napkin. And so I said, I want to earn more money at this company, but I fully understand that in order to earn more money, I have to make more money for the company. So I brought you an idea for what I think I could increase and grow within the company that would be really material to you. And if I did those things, maybe I could make this number at the bottom. And if that number isn't right for you, I'd love to have a conversation on what it would take for me to get to that bottom number, and we could adjust the top ones. And he kind of like looked at me, he's like, fucking that, like what's wrong with, it's just like defused the situation. Yeah. And so as an employee, those little negotiation tactics, I did them at least once a year, and sometimes I did them biannually if I was really killing it. Led me to being one of the better paid people pretty consistently. And then I always usually asked for any ability to co-invest in deals we were doing. So it was like, I'm going to put my money, I believe in what we're doing so much here. I'd like to put my money into a deal. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm asking for you to maybe let me put $5,000 in. And that led to me accelerating my cash faster.
Super cool. Yeah, there's such lesson there around asking for asking for the raise, which I don't think I ever in my entire career asked for a raise ever. That said, I would more like, maybe this is asking, right? I would negotiate some way to make more money if the business did well, right? Yep. So I was never asking, and this is probably the difference. I mean, I've had many employees come and ask me for raises, and sometimes we give them, sometimes we don't. But ultimately, I love that you said, I know the company has to make more money, so how do I get there? Exactly. That's the approach. So I just find little ways to negotiate. For example, the small way was I wrote a book for Bigger Pockets. I wrote 5 of them, right? And I got a piece of all of them. So the better the books did, the more money that I made. So I gave myself a raise. It reminds me of James Altucher, I think is his name. Yeah. He wrote a book called Choose Yourself. Yeah. It's like instead of waiting around for somebody to choose you, it's like I'm going to go find a way to make this happen. Yeah. And I think people would be surprised at how many bosses out there would be really excited to have that conversation with their employees, because it's not an entitlement conversation. It's how can I provide more value to this company and therefore make more money?
Yeah, it's so true. Well, I think there's like a canyon of competence in the world today. And basically you have on one side very, very few highly competent, highly trusted humans. And then you have this chasm between the rest of the people out there. And most people, candidly, Don't work as hard as the top A players. The 80-20 rule is really true. 80% of your results will be driven by 20% of your people and vice versa. And I've looked at hundreds of deals, and this happens across almost all of my companies. Yeah. And so if you can get yourself on the right side of the chasm, one, you're going to be able to negotiate much, much better. But if you ask yourself this question, you don't deserve a raise. And the question is, how much value do I drive to this company? And if your answer to that question is, I don't know, then you can't ask for a raise. Because the only way you can ask for a raise is if you say, I think I drive this much for the company. I'm not sure. I'd like to check in with them on a consistent basis. I think I'm beating my goals every single time. And if not, I don't think you can ask for a raise. But what's interesting is this stuff is like so popular to talk about on the internet. I remember we did a video that I thought was really good, and it was about how to ask for a raise. And it was like, wah, nobody cared. And then it was like 37 passive income strategies for, huge, And it's like, you are going to make so much money working for somebody else and doing all the mistakes on their dime
100%.
For probably the first at least 5, but maybe 10 years of your career, because it will never bankrupt you. Yeah. And then once you get past that 10-year period, start taking that cash and doing other stuff with it. But in the beginning, I mean, gosh, the amount of mistakes I made on Goldman's dime and Vanguard's dime and State Street's dime were probably, $1 million plus. And that would have ruined me, but didn't hurt them.
I know. Yeah, I built my whole thing off. I mean, I made so many mistakes on Josh Dorkin's dime on Bigger Pockets, right? Yeah, I learned how to podcast. I learned social media. I learned how to raise capital. All of that while getting a good salary that was scalable income at Bigger Pockets. Now, what do you say to those people, though, they're firemen, they are a teacher, they can't negotiate for more, they're not going to get more? Yeah. What do you say to those people? How do they earn more?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for those type of people, a couple things. One, I think there are fewer of you than you think. Mm-hmm. Don't use it as an excuse. Many people hear this and they go, I could never negotiate for a higher salary because I'm a mortgage broker and my boss said I couldn't. It's like, this is not, no, that's wrong. Yep. If your boss says you couldn't, for 99.9% of you guys, get a new job. That's it. And if you can't grow according to your value you're adding to the company, jump every 2 years. Yep. I like to give pretty much everybody at my company has some sort of incentive aligned bonus. So if you do X and we win, you get Y. And I think that's the way that it should be. So that's what you should strive for. Now, for the 0.1% of people, like a teacher or a firefighter, I would say that you have to get really, really smart then on taking the amount of capital you have and learning how to invest it. Because the problem is it really does take money to make money on investing. And anybody who tells you otherwise than that is not true. So your game would be, how can I learn as much as possible in some ancillary field that could be, that I could have an unfair advantage in. Like if I was a teacher, I would probably have a Gumroad course that I sell on how to teach a class publicly, and I would sell that to my other teachers. Or I might do tutoring on the side, and then I might scale up the tutoring business on the side to a curriculum that I sell to other people tutoring on the side. And then at some point, you might determine that you don't want to teach or be a firefighter anymore and do those other paths, or you have what I like to call the FU fund, which is just you have enough cash where at any given point, if somebody tells you something to do that you don't want to do, you get to say, I'm out.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, and really what you're doing in that case is you're elevating your skill set to a higher dollar per hour task, right? Yep. Being a teacher, teachers are super valuable. We love them and all that, but it's still a $40,000 a year job, which is whatever, I don't know, $20 an hour, $15 an hour. It's a $20 an hour job. Yep. And so if you now learn course creation, now that's a $100 an hour job. Once you get good at it. Yep. And if you learn trading at Goldman Sachs, now maybe you're at a $500 an hour job. So everything got a dollar per hour. And the great thing about our modern economy is that you can gain those skills for no cost, like YouTube, or you may pay for a course if you want to get more direct, fast growth.
Yeah,
but
it's true.
It's all right there.
Well, the other part is typically jobs where you cannot negotiate for an upside, you have a ton of downtime. Yeah. Teachers, you have the entire summer off. What are you doing with it? Teachers, you only work from 8 to 3 typically. What are you doing with the rest of the time? Teachers, how about you work in a public school right now where definitely you're capped? Why don't you go to Tim Kennedy's school here and see if they have higher pay that they pay people? And also, if you get into an entrepreneurial school like that, or a private school, you have the ability to negotiate not only your salary, but what else can I do? Yes, I'm a teacher, but I would also like to start this XYZ thing. Can I get a cut of the the revenue from an outside curriculum that I start? You know, what if I bring in some sponsorship dollars for the school for this new baseball team that we're starting, and I bring on a coach for it too, even though I have nothing to do with it? Could I get some cut? So I think basically we call this becoming a deal maker. It's how can you see through the matrix? Like once you see how business is played and you understand the matrix, one, you can never go back. You've been red pilled. Yeah. And two, you'll see business opportunities everywhere. And it'll actually like drive probably your partner crazy. I don't know if your wife, well, she's in the game too, but
it does drive her crazy.
Yeah. You go into a place, you're like, oh my gosh, not optimized tables over here. You know, what about signage? I can't believe that they don't have an online presence, right? And so get to that level, then you will never listen to a podcast and go, there's no way I can earn more. And if you are saying there's no way you can earn more, you haven't unlocked the matrix yet.
I never thought about it that way, but you're so right. There are two types of people I feel like that are out there. There's people that say there's no opportunity. So the biggest problem they have is, how do I make more money? I don't know what to do. There's no opportunity. And then there's the other half of the people who are like, there's so much opportunity. What do I say no to? Yeah. And like, so for us who are entrepreneurial, like we're always thinking, every day, 100 times a day, I'm like, oh, I would love to buy that business and just turn it around and I can make this thing happen. And a lot of that just comes from like frustrations. Anytime I ever have a problem with anything whatsoever, my mind automatically goes to, is this a business I could run to try to fix this problem? Right? Versus people are just like, this is a problem. This place sucks. Why are they, like, there's two types of people and you get to choose which one you want to be. And the more you live in one, the more you get good at that one. So choose wisely.
Oh, it's very true. Also, I read the statistic the other day that was fascinating. It goes back to making sure that you're with other people who have been red pilled as much as you humanly can. And the reason why is there's a study across 58,000 hours in 11 companies where if you sit within 25 feet of a top performer, your performance increases by 15%. Wow. You are no smarter, you work no harder, you are no better, and you're 15% better, right? So if you make $100,000 a year, you're making $115,000 to really just cement the imagery of this. Now, here's the downside. If you sit within 25 feet of a poor performer, your performance suffers by 30%. Wow. And so it actually really, really matters what you listen to, who you sit next to, what company you work for. If you are sitting right now at a company with a bunch of people that you think are not grinding and growing, not only are you upset and you don't like what you're doing and you're not making enough money, but you're actually worse than you could be. And if you're in a company with a bunch of performers, you are better than you actually could be. And so I think that's why my companies, we've never really struggled to hire, because I try to have a really high level of competence. And when people don't have a high level of competence, I very kindly tell them, this isn't your place. Like, it's on to the next for you, because not only are you not a high performer, but now you make everybody else slightly worse. And so it's being that relentless, I think, with who else is around you. It turns out that there's a power to proximity, and your performance is contagious.
That's so true. It goes back to what you were saying about we get around people who make their goal, their norm, your goal, or your goal, their norm.
Right.
Yeah. Just because you become like those people. I like to say, like, I want to surround myself with people who make the impossible look like a Tuesday morning. It's just like for me right now, six pack seems impossible for me. I'm like, that's just crazy. But then there's some people who are like, do you know Gabe Hamill? You ever met Gabe? Gabe's a good buddy of mine, but Gabe is the most, he has the world record for diamond push-ups. I mean, the most in shape guy in the world that I know. And like, it's just not weird for him to be in a perfect shape. That's just normal life, right? But then I look at that and there's things that he does that are very different than what I do. He goes to a conference. We'll go to conferences together. And the first thing he does is he goes to Whole Foods and he goes and stocks up on food. I love that. Yeah, he doesn't eat at the, like, why would you eat at the conference food? Like, that food's not good. Like, he goes to Whole Foods and gets fruits and vegetables. And he's also vegan, and I'm not vegan. So I look at that, I'm like, okay, well, so if I adopted some of the things he does, and I do that for long enough, I should naturally become more like Gabe. It's not a rocket science. It's like, figure out who does it, who makes the impossible look like a Tuesday morning, do what they do, and you get the results, or at least a portion thereof.